The argument is already over, but you're still defending yourself in your head. You're lying there staring at your phone, rereading the conversation one more time, wondering which sentence made them pull away. So you start typing again. A longer explanation this time. You explain your intentions, your tone, why you reacted the way you did. Because somewhere deep down, you believe that if you can just say it perfectly enough, they'll finally understand you. But the truth is, people who genuinely care rarely need endless explanations, and that's the trap most people never see. The more emotionally reactive you become, the more power other people gain over your peace. Every rushed response, every defensive paragraph, every attempt to be understood becomes proof that someone still has access to your emotions. Stoicism teaches something uncomfortable but freeing. Not everyone deserves a reaction. Some people don't want clarity. They want emotional control. They want to know they can still disturb your mind and change your mood from a distance. And the moment you stop reacting to everything, stop explaining yourself to everyone, and stop chasing people determined to misunderstand you, your entire life begins to change. Because real power is not loud. Real power is calm. 1. Your reactions are telling people how to control you. A single text message should not have the power to ruin your entire night, but lately, it does. You tell yourself you're fine at first. You toss your phone onto the bed, try to watch something, try to relax. But your mind keeps drifting back to the conversation. Something about their tone changed. It was subtle, but you felt it instantly. Shorter replies, less warmth, a colder period at the end of a sentence that normally would have had a heart emoji. And now your entire nervous system is reacting to something most people wouldn't even notice. So you check the conversation again. Then again, 10 minutes later, you start analyzing tiny details like they're evidence in a crime scene. The speed of the reply, the wording, the energy. You replay yesterday's conversation, trying to figure out where things shifted. And eventually, without even realizing it, your peace disappears. Not because something terrible happened, because your emotional state became dependent on another person's behavior. That's the trap Stoicism tries to warn people about. Most suffering doesn't come from reality itself. It comes from the meaning your mind attaches to it. A delayed reply becomes rejection. Silence becomes abandonment. Distance becomes proof that you're no longer valued. So you react emotionally before you even know the truth. And the scary part is, the more reactive you become, the easier you are to control. Not because people are always manipulating you intentionally, but because reactions reveal where your emotional dependency lives. Think about it. The people who can instantly ruin your mood usually have something in common. You care deeply about how they see you. Their attention affects your self-worth more than you want to admit. That's why one small shift from them feels so powerful. You're not reacting to the event itself. You're reacting to what losing their approval might mean emotionally. And once someone has that level of emotional access to you, your inner peace becomes fragile. You notice this one night while sitting in your car outside your apartment. The engine is off, but you're still parked there staring at your phone. 20 minutes ago, you were in a perfectly good mood. Music playing, windows down, feeling calm for the first time all week. Then one conversation changed everything. Now you're sitting there, rereading messages, trying to decode another person's energy while your entire evening slowly collapses emotionally. And suddenly, a thought hits you that's hard to ignore. They probably aren't even thinking about this right now. That realization hurts. Because while you've been mentally drowning in overanalysis, the other person may have already moved on with their evening completely unaffected. Meanwhile, your mind has been held hostage by a conversation that lasted 6 minutes. That's when you begin understanding something most people never fully realize. Emotional reactions are expensive. They drain your focus, your sleep, your confidence, your ability to stay present in your own life. And the worst part is, repeated reactions slowly train people how to handle you. If every time someone becomes distant, you immediately chase reassurance, people learn that distance controls you. If every misunderstanding makes you over-explain yourself emotionally, people learn you fear being misunderstood. If every cold interaction changes your mood instantly, people learn how easily your emotional state can be moved. Your reactions teach people where your emotional buttons are. And once those buttons become visible, inner peace becomes almost impossible. That's why calm people feel different. Not because nothing affects them, but because they refuse to let every emotional impulse turn into behavior. They feel disappointment without spiraling. They feel hurt without abandoning themselves. They notice disrespect without immediately needing revenge, explanation, or emotional closure. That kind of discipline changes everything. Because the moment you stop reacting instantly, you start seeing reality more clearly. You stop confusing anxiety with intuition. You stop treating uncertainty like danger. You stop assuming every shift in energy means you're losing someone. And strangely, this is usually when your relationships begin changing too. Because calmness disrupts emotional patterns. People expect emotional access to the version of you that panics, chases, explains, and reacts. So, when you suddenly become grounded or observant and emotionally steady, the dynamic shifts immediately. Some people become confused. Some become uncomfortable. Some even try harder to provoke a reaction because your calmness removes the emotional control they once had. And that's the twist most people never expect. Your constant reactions were not protecting your relationships. They were weakening your position inside them, because real emotional strength is not controlling other people. It's controlling yourself when emotions beg you to react impulsively. That's what Stoicism teaches. Not becoming cold, not pretending not to care, but learning how to feel deeply without surrendering ownership of your mind. And once you experience that kind of calm for the first time, you realize how exhausting it was to spend years emotionally reacting to everything. 2. Manipulative people don't want your peace. They want your reaction. At first, you thought they were just difficult, maybe emotionally unavailable, maybe inconsistent, maybe bad at communication. That's what you kept telling yourself every time their behavior left you confused. But slowly, a pattern started becoming impossible to ignore. They would pull away right after moments of closeness. Go cold after you opened up emotionally. Ignore your message, then suddenly return the second you stopped caring. And somehow, every interaction left you mentally exhausted while they always seemed perfectly fine. That's when you begin realizing something uncomfortable. Some people are not looking for connection. They're looking for emotional control. Not always consciously, not always maliciously. But certain people feel powerful when they can affect your emotional state. Your reaction reassures them. Your overthinking feeds their ego. Your emotional chasing becomes proof that they still have influence over you. And once you see that pattern clearly, you can never unsee it again. You notice it one afternoon at work. There's someone who always makes small comments around other people. Nothing aggressive enough to call out directly. Just subtle little remarks designed to provoke insecurity. A joke about your confidence, a sarcastic comment about something personal, a dismissive tone disguised as humor. Usually, you react internally right away. Your mood changes. You spend the next hour replaying the interaction in your head, thinking of all the things you should have said back. But this time, something is different. You just look at them calmly. No defensive explanation, no forced laugh, no emotional reaction. And for a brief second, you notice something strange. They become uncomfortable. Because manipulative behavior depends on emotional access. The moment someone can no longer predict your reaction, they lose psychological control over the interaction. That's why emotionally reactive people are easier to manipulate. Not because they're weak, because their emotional patterns are visible. People know exactly what affects them, exactly what triggers insecurity, exactly how to get a response. And the scary part is, many people learn your emotional buttons simply by observing you over time. They notice what makes you anxious, what makes you over-explain, what makes you chase reassurance, what instantly changes your mood. And once someone realizes they can emotionally move you whenever they want, the balance of the relationship quietly changes. This is why Stoicism places so much value on emotional discipline. Because calmness disrupts manipulation, silence disrupts manipulation, detachment disrupts manipulation. When someone expects immediate emotional access to you and suddenly they can't reach you the same way anymore, it unsettles them. Your calmness becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability removes control. That's why some people become even more provocative once you stop reacting. You stop replying emotionally, and suddenly they text more. You become distant, and suddenly they become attentive again. You stop chasing, and suddenly they start testing whether they still matter to you. Most people mistake this for love or renewed interest, but often it's something deeper. They are reacting to the loss of emotional control. That realization changes the way you see relationships forever. Because you begin understanding that not every connection is built on genuine care. Some are built on emotional dependency, on one person needing constant reassurance while the other enjoys being emotionally pursued. And once you stop participating in that cycle, the dynamic starts collapsing on its own. You notice this especially in silence. Silence reveals everything. The people who truly value you become more honest. The people who only valued emotional access become restless. Because silence forces people to sit with themselves instead of feeding off your reactions. That's why emotionally mature people don't react to every little thing. They observe first, they pause, they let emotions settle before responding. Not because they're emotionless, because they understand something most people don't. Immediate reactions usually benefit the person trying to provoke them, and the older you get, the more obvious this becomes. Some arguments were never about truth. Some conversations were never about understanding. Some people were simply trying to pull emotion out of you because it made them feel powerful, important, or secure. That's why calmness feels intimidating to emotionally immature people. Your silence forces them to face uncertainty. They can no longer read you easily, can no longer predict your behavior, can no longer control the emotional atmosphere around you. And honestly, this is the moment your life starts changing. Not when people finally understand you, not when everyone treats you perfectly, but when you stop giving every difficult person unlimited access to your emotions. Because once your reactions become intentional instead of automatic, something powerful happens. Your mind becomes harder to disturb. Your peace becomes harder to steal. And people who once controlled your emotions begin losing access to the version of you they were used to manipulating. 3. Stop explaining yourself to people. Determined to misunderstand you. You don't realize how exhausting over-explaining is until one day you stop doing it. At first, it feels almost unnatural. Someone misunderstands your intentions and your instinct immediately tells you to fix it, to clarify, to explain your tone, your reasons, your heart. Because deep down, you believe that if people could just fully understand you, everything would finally feel okay again. So you keep talking, keep defending, keep trying to make your perspective sound reasonable enough to deserve respect. And slowly, without noticing, you begin abandoning yourself in the process. You notice it during a late-night conversation with someone you care about. What started as something small somehow turns into another long emotional discussion where you spend almost the entire time explaining yourself. Why you reacted that way, why certain things hurt you, why you needed space, why you didn't mean what they assumed you meant. And the strange part is, halfway through the conversation, you suddenly realize they're barely even listening anymore. They already decided who you are before you started explaining. That realization changes something inside you, because for the first time, you understand this painful truth. Not everyone wants clarity. Some people want confirmation of the version of you they already created in their mind, and no amount of explaining can change that. Stoicism teaches that peace begins when you stop trying to control things outside yourself. And one of the hardest things to stop controlling is other people's perception of you, especially when being misunderstood hurts, especially when you know your intentions were genuine. But emotionally mature people eventually learn something most people spend years avoiding. You can explain your heart perfectly and still be misunderstood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. That's why over-explaining becomes dangerous, not because communication is bad, but because constant explanation often comes from fear, not honesty. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of losing connection. You think you're communicating, but deep down, you're begging to be seen correctly. And the more emotionally desperate your explanations become, the less grounded you feel inside yourself. That's why some conversations leave you emotionally drained for days afterward. Not because the discussion was difficult, but because your self-worth became trapped inside whether the other person validated your intentions or not. Once your peace depends on being understood by everyone, peace becomes impossible. You start rehearsing conversations in your head before they happen, rewriting texts multiple times, explaining boundaries you already had the right to set without permission, trying to soften your honesty so nobody feels uncomfortable. And eventually, you become emotionally exhausted from carrying the responsibility of managing everyone else's perception of you. Then one day, something shifts. Someone misunderstands you again, but this time, you stay calm. No paragraph, no emotional defense, no desperate attempt to correct every assumption. You simply let them think what they want. And strangely, instead of feeling weak, you feel free. Because for the first time, you realize how much energy you wasted trying to force understanding from people who were never truly open to it. That's the twist most people miss. Over-explaining does not create respect. It often destroys it. Because the more desperately you need to prove yourself emotionally, the more people feel your fear underneath your words. Fear of being disliked, fear of being left, fear of not being enough. And manipulative people can sense that immediately. But calm people move differently. They explain themselves once, clearly and honestly. After that, they observe. If someone still chooses misunderstanding, accusation, or emotional games, they stop fighting for approval and start protecting their peace. That's real emotional maturity. Understanding that not every misunderstanding requires a defense. Not every accusation deserves your energy, and not every person deserves unlimited access to your inner world. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people misunderstand you while you continue becoming who you truly are anyway. That kind of silence changes you. You stop performing emotionally for acceptance, stop negotiating your worth, stop shrinking your truth to make other people comfortable, and little by little, you begin trusting yourself more than the opinions constantly shifting around you. That's when your mind becomes quieter, not because everyone suddenly understands you, but because you no longer need them to. 4. Calmness is a form of power. Most people never develop. You notice it during an argument you would have reacted to a year ago. Someone raises their voice at you, not screaming exactly, but enough to pull emotion out of the room, enough to make everyone uncomfortable. In the past, you would have immediately defended yourself, explained your intentions, matched their energy without even realizing it, but this time, something strange happens. You pause. You let the silence sit there for a second. And instead of reacting emotionally, you simply look at them calmly and say, "I understand how you feel." That's it. No dramatic defense, no emotional explosion, no desperate need to win. and suddenly the entire energy shifts. Because calmness does something emotionally reactive people don't understand, it removes chaos from the interaction. Most people are so used to emotional reactions that they mistake them for strength. Loud opinions, immediate anger, constant defending. But real emotional power often looks quiet from the outside. It looks like self-control, and the older you get, the more you realize how rare that actually is. Anyone can react emotionally. Anyone can say something hurtful in the heat of the moment. Anyone can lose control when their ego feels threatened. But staying grounded while emotions pull at you from every direction, that takes discipline. That takes awareness. That takes strength most people never build. You begin noticing this everywhere once your own mind becomes calmer. The loudest person in the room is often the least in control. The person trying hardest to dominate conversations is usually fighting internal insecurity. The people constantly demanding attention are often terrified of silence. And suddenly, you stop admiring emotional intensity the way you used to. Because intensity is not stability. A person can feel deeply and still lack emotional maturity completely. That realization changes the way you see people forever. You notice it one weekend while having dinner with someone you once would have chased endlessly. In the past, every small change in their mood would have affected you instantly. If they became distant, you became anxious. If they acted cold, you overanalyzed yourself for hours afterward. But now, something feels different. They pull away emotionally during the conversation like they've done before. Short answers, distracted energy, little tests to see if you'll start chasing reassurance again. Only this time, you don't. You stay relaxed. You continue enjoying your meal. You stop trying to force connection back into the moment. And for the first time, you notice something shocking. The less emotionally reactive you become, the more clearly you see other people's behavior. Because calmness removes emotional fog. When you're constantly reacting, you can't observe clearly. Fear distorts everything. Anxiety makes you chase. Emotional attachment makes you ignore patterns that would otherwise be obvious. But silence sharpens perception. Now you notice who creates tension intentionally, who only gives attention after distance appears, who becomes uncomfortable when they can no longer control the emotional atmosphere around you. And honestly, some people don't know how to connect without emotional chaos. That's the painful truth. They confuse instability with passion, confuse emotional highs and lows with love, confuse your reactions with proof that you care. So when you stop reacting the way you used to, the relationship itself begins changing. Sometimes it becomes healthier. Sometimes it falls apart completely. But either way, reality finally reveals itself. That's why Stoicism values calmness so deeply. Not because emotions are bad, but because emotional discipline protects your ability to see clearly. And clarity changes everything. You stop needing to win every argument. Stop needing the final word. Stop needing everyone to validate your perspective before you feel okay again. Because inner peace no longer depends on controlling the outside world. It comes from controlling yourself. That's why calm people feel powerful without trying. Their energy is steady. Their emotions are intentional. Their silence says more than most people's reactions ever could. And eventually, you realize something that changes the entire way you move through life. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest one. It's usually the person who remains emotionally grounded while everyone else loses control. 5. The moment you stop chasing, everything changes. You don't notice how much of your life has been spent chasing people until you finally stop. At first, it feels uncomfortable, too quiet. You stop sending the second text. Stop checking who viewed your story. Stop trying to repair every shift in energy the moment it appears. And suddenly, you're left alone with a question you spent years avoiding. If I stop chasing, who actually stays? That question changes everything. You feel it one Sunday morning. Your phone is unusually silent. Normally, this would have made you anxious. You would have started reaching out first, creating conversation, keeping connections alive because silence always felt dangerous to you. But this time, you do nothing. You make coffee, sit near the window, let the silence exist without trying to control it. And slowly, something strange begins happening. You start seeing people more clearly, because when you stop chasing, masks begin falling off naturally. Some people disappear the moment you stop giving constant attention. Some only return when they feel your energy pulling away. Some suddenly become interested again once they realize they no longer have guaranteed access to you. And that realization hurts more than rejection sometimes, because you begin understanding that many connections were never as balanced as you believed. You were carrying them, carrying the conversations, the emotional effort, the understanding, the patience, the constant attempts to keep everything together. And once you stop over-functioning emotionally, the truth quietly reveals itself. Some people only loved how available you were, not who you truly were. That's the painful twist most people avoid their entire lives. They think they're fighting for love when they're actually fighting to avoid abandonment. So they tolerate disrespect, ignore inconsistency, keep explaining themselves to people who barely listen, because losing connection feels more terrifying than losing themselves. But Stoicism teaches something freeing. Peace begins the moment you stop negotiating your self-worth for temporary emotional closeness. And honestly, that lesson changes the entire way you move through life. You notice it one night while scrolling through old conversations, messages where you kept trying to revive dying energy, times you apologized just to restore peace even when you weren't truly wrong, moments where you made yourself emotionally smaller so someone else would stay comfortable around you. And suddenly, you feel exhausted for the version of yourself who thought that was love. Because real connection does not require you to abandon your dignity to maintain it. Real connection does not survive only when you chase. That's why emotionally mature people know when to stop forcing things. Not because they don't care, but because they finally understand this truth. Anything built on emotional chasing eventually destroys your peace. The strange part is, once you stop chasing, people react differently. Some become confused, some become distant, some suddenly give you the attention you begged for before. But now it feels different, because once you stop needing validation from someone, their attention loses the power it once had over you. That's real emotional freedom, not becoming cold, not isolating yourself from people, but no longer treating another person's attention like oxygen. And ironically, this is usually when respect begins appearing, because people feel the difference between someone who wants connection and someone who emotionally needs it to feel okay inside themselves. Neediness creates pressure. Calmness creates presence. That's why the strongest people are often the ones most willing to walk away peacefully. No revenge. No dramatic goodbye. No desperate attempt to make someone understand what they lost. Just quiet acceptance. Because they finally realize something powerful. Not every loss is a tragedy. Some losses are the removal of emotional confusion. Some endings are protection. And sometimes the most life-changing thing you can do is let people lose access to the version of you that kept abandoning itself just to keep them around. That version was exhausted. Always reacting, always chasing, always waiting for someone else to decide whether you were enough. But now, something inside you feels different. Quieter, stronger, more certain. Because for the first time in a long time, your peace is no longer begging to be chosen. 6. The strongest people protect their peace. Differently. There comes a point where you stop wanting revenge, and honestly, that's when your healing truly begins. Not when people apologize, not when they finally understand your value, not when they regret losing you, but when your mind no longer needs any of those things to feel at peace. You notice it one evening while walking home after a long day. Months ago, your mind would have been full of noise, replaying conversations, imagining what you should have said differently, wondering whether certain people missed you, misunderstood you, or secretly thought about you the way you thought about them. But now the silence inside your head feels different. Cleaner. You pass restaurants filled with people talking loudly, couples staring at phones across the table, strangers pretending to listen to each other while mentally being somewhere else entirely. And suddenly, you realize how much of modern life is built around emotional distraction. Everyone reacting, everyone proving, everyone chasing validation from people equally lost themselves. And for the first time in a long time, you no longer feel the need to participate in it. That's the real transformation Stoicism creates. Not perfection, not emotional numbness, just freedom from the constant need to emotionally react to everything around you. Because once you begin protecting your peace intentionally, your entire life changes quietly. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop forcing conversations that drain your spirit. Stop checking your phone, searching for emotional reassurance every hour. And slowly, your nervous system begins trusting silence again. That's when clarity returns. You start noticing how many things once controlled you unnecessarily. How many sleepless nights came from overthinking people who barely thought about you at all. How much emotional energy was wasted trying to preserve connections that only survived when you carried them alone. And maybe the hardest realization of all, you were abandoning yourself long before anyone else abandoned you. That truth hurts, because for years you thought your suffering came from losing people, but most of the suffering came from losing your own center while trying to keep them. Trying to stay lovable, easy, understanding, emotionally available, no matter how drained you became. And eventually, your soul gets tired of living that way. That's why emotionally disciplined people begin valuing peace more than attention. Because attention is temporary. Validation fades. People change constantly. But inner stability becomes a home you carry everywhere. You notice this especially when difficult situations happen again. Someone ignores you. Someone judges you unfairly. Someone tries to provoke the old emotional version of you. But this time, your mind doesn't collapse into reaction immediately. You pause, you breathe, you observe the emotion without obeying it. And in that small pause, something powerful happens. You realize emotions are temporary visitors, not commands. That realization changes your entire life. Because most people think emotional strength means never feeling hurt. But Stoicism teaches something deeper. Strength is feeling emotions fully without allowing them to control your behavior. That's why calmness feels so powerful. It's not suppression, it's mastery. The ability to remain connected to yourself while the world around you pulls for a reaction. And honestly, once you experience that kind of peace, you stop craving chaos disguised as connection. You stop romanticizing emotional instability. Stop confusing anxiety with love. Stop chasing people simply because your nervous system became addicted to uncertainty. Now, your standards become different. You value consistency, honesty, presence. You begin protecting your energy the way emotionally mature people do, quietly, without performance. And that's the final lesson most people learn too late. Your peace is more valuable than being understood by everyone. More valuable than winning arguments. More valuable than forcing people to choose you, because the strongest people are not the loudest ones. They are the ones who can walk away from disrespect without needing revenge. Sit in silence without panicking, and let people misunderstand them without losing themselves in the process. That's real power, and once you find it, you stop giving it away so easily. At the end of the day, Stoicism is not about becoming cold, emotionless, or distant from people. It's about learning how to protect your peace in a world constantly trying to pull reactions out of you. Throughout this video, You saw how emotional reactions slowly give other people control over your mind, how over-explaining drains your self-respect, and why calmness becomes a form of quiet power most people never develop. But none of this changes your life unless you practice it. The next time someone misunderstands you, pause before reacting. The next time someone pulls away, resist the urge to chase. And the next time life tries to disturb your peace, remember that not every emotion deserves a response. Because real strength is not found in controlling others. It's found in controlling yourself. If this video spoke to you, comment, "Silence is power." And share this video with someone who's emotionally exhausted from constantly explaining themselves to people who are never truly listening. Thank you for watching, for spending these moments reflecting with me, and for choosing growth over emotional chaos. Stay calm, protect your peace, and I'll see you in the next video.